Ray's mother kept $11,000 in a biscuit tin on top of the wardrobe for 19 years. She was not stupid. She had worked 2 jobs for most of those 19 years. She could tell you the price of everything in the shop without looking. When Ray finally asked her why she never put it in the market, she said something he has never been able to forget. She said, "Because if it goes, there is nothing behind it." That sentence is the whole video. It is also, by the way, correct. Not irrational, not ignorant. Correct given her situation. And it still costs her about $226,000. Both of those things are true at the same time, and almost nobody explains why. So let's do it properly. Ray is 34. He supervises a shift at a distribution warehouse and earns $44,000 a year. He has 2 kids. He grew up watching his mother do the thing that a lot of people watch their parents do. Keep money where she could see it. Cash in a tin. Then, later, a basic savings account paying almost nothing. Never a fund, never a share, never anything that could move on its own. When Ray got his first steady job, a colleague told him to put money into an index fund, and Ray felt something he could not name at the time. It was not confusion. He understood what a share was. It was dread. He described it later as the feeling of being told to put his hand into a box he could not see inside. Now, the standard explanation for this is financial literacy. The idea is that people do not invest because they do not know how. There is real research on that. Annamaria Lusardi and Olivia Mitchell developed what became known as the Big 3 financial literacy questions. 3 simple questions about interest, inflation, and diversification. Across many countries, a large share of adults cannot answer all 3 correctly, and the rates are worst among lower income respondents. So literacy is genuinely part of it, but it is not the main part, and here is how you can tell. Ray knew what an index fund was. His colleague explained it twice. He looked it up himself. He understood the mechanism perfectly well. He still did not do it. For 11 years. Knowledge was not the blockage. Something else was. Here is the thing that almost every investing video gets wrong. And it gets it wrong because of who makes those videos. When a person with 3 months of expenses in the bank loses 30% in a market drop, they lose 30%. When a person with no buffer at all loses 30%, they lose the car repair. They lose the deposit on the flat. They lose the ability to say no to a payday loan in March. Those are not the same event. They have the same name and the same percentage, and they are completely different things. The Federal Reserve's own household survey has repeatedly found that a large share of American adults, around a third, could not cover an unexpected $400 expense with cash. Read that next to a market that routinely falls 20 or 30% and then recovers over several years. It recovers is a sentence that requires you to be able to wait. Waiting is a purchased good. It is bought with a buffer. If you do not have the buffer, you do not own the ability to wait. And without the ability to wait, the stock market genuinely is dangerous for you because you will be forced to sell at the bottom, not by panic, but by a boiler. And notice how invisible that is in the way investing gets talked about. Every chart you have ever seen showing the market recovering assumes one thing that is never stated out loud, that the person holding it did not have to sell. That assumption is doing enormous work. It is the difference between the line on the chart and the money in your account. Somebody with a year of expenses in reserve gets a line on the chart. Somebody with nothing gets whatever the market happened to be doing on the week their transmission failed. Same fund, same 30 years. Completely different outcome. And the difference has nothing to do with intelligence, discipline, or research. It is entirely about whether there was something else to reach for when life did what life does. That is why the advice, just stay invested, lands so badly on people without a cushion. It is not that they disagree with it. It is that it describes a capability they do not currently own. So when Ray's mother said, if it goes, there is nothing behind it, she was not describing a feeling. She was describing a balance sheet. The fear is not a knowledge problem. It is an accurate reading of a real position. And the honest conclusion from that is not invest anyway. It is that something has to be built first. We will get to exactly what. On top of the real position, there is a second layer, and this one is in everybody's head, rich or poor. In 1979, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky published prospect theory. And the finding people remember is loss aversion. Losing something hurts roughly twice as much as gaining the same thing feels good. Twice. That is the exchange rate your brain applies without asking you. Now hold that against a small balance. If you have $100,000 and you lose $500, the loss registers and then it goes away. If you have $1,100 and you lose 500, that is not a percentage, that is the month. So the same psychological multiplier lands on a much thinner surface. The pain is not just proportionally bigger, it is closer to the bone. Work it through properly, because the arithmetic here is genuinely different, not just emotionally different. Two people both put $1,000 in and the market falls 30%. Both are down $300. Identical loss, identical percentage. The first person has $8,000 sitting in a separate account. For them, $300 is a number on a screen that they will look at, dislike, and then ignore. Nothing in their week changes. They do not even have to make a decision. The second person has $40 in checking and a car that needs tires. For them, $300 is not a screen. It is the difference between getting to work next month and not. They are not choosing whether to sell. The situation is choosing for them. Now ask which of those two people learns that the market is dangerous. Both saw the same drop. Only one of them got hurt by it. And the one who got hurt now has a personal, first-hand, entirely accurate memory that investing cost them something real, which they will carry for the rest of their life and pass on to their children. And there is a third layer from the scarcity research by Sendhil, Mullainathan, and Eldar Shafir. They describe how being short of resources produces tunneling. Attention narrows onto the immediate shortage and long horizon decisions get pushed outside the tunnel entirely. Investing is the most long horizon decision an ordinary person ever makes. Its entire value is delivered decades later. That is precisely the kind of thing tunneling removes from view. So we have three things stacked. A real position where losses are genuinely dangerous, a brain that doubles the pain of every loss, and a scarcity state that pushes anything 30 years away out of the frame. None of that is a character flaw. Every part of it is documented. Now, the layer that finance videos skip almost entirely because it is uncomfortable. A lot of people do not invest because of what happened the last time they trusted a financial institution. In 2008, Luigi Guizzo, Paula Sapienza, and Luigi Zingales published a paper in the Journal of Finance called Trusting the Stock Market. Their argument, supported across countries, was that generalized trust is a major determinant of whether a household participates in the stock market at all, independent of wealth and education. If you do not trust the institution, you do not participate. That is the finding, and it is not irrational because trust is built on experience. And what is the actual experience of financial institutions at the lower end of the income distribution? Overdraft fees that trigger on low balances, interest rates that go up as your credit score goes down, products sold on commission to people who did not understand them, check-a cashing shops and payday lenders clustered in exactly the neighborhoods with the least money. Then, in 2008, an entire financial crisis caused by institutions that were largely rescued, while a great many ordinary households were not. Ray's mother lost a job in 2009 and did not get an equivalent one back for 4 years. Now, walk into that living room and say the words, "Trust the market" for 30 years. You are not fighting ignorance. You are fighting evidence. The honest response is not to tell people their distrust is silly. It is to be extremely clear about which specific thing is being recommended. Because a low-cost broad index fund is not the same animal as the commission product somebody's cousin got sold in 2006. And the difference is the entire argument. There is one more mechanism, and it is the most quietly powerful of the lot because it operates across generations. In 2011, Ulrich Malmendier and Stefan Nagel published a paper in the Quarterly Journal of Economics with a title that stuck: Depression Babies. They examined decades of household data and found that people who had personally lived through poor stock market returns were significantly less willing to take financial risk and less likely to participate in the market at all for decades afterward. Not because of what they read, because of what they lived through. Personal experience beat historical data consistently. Now, consider what that means in a household where the lived experience of markets is a parent losing a job in a crash, or a relative losing savings in a bad product, or simply a lifetime of nothing to invest. The next generation inherits a risk setting, not a rule, not a conversation, a default. Ray was not afraid of the stock market. Ray was afraid in exactly the way his mother was afraid, about a market he had never personally participated in. That is what makes this so persistent, and it is also why just look at the historical returns does almost nothing. The person is not arguing with the data. They are carrying somebody else's memory. And memory is not stored as an argument, which is why you cannot argue it away. You can win every point in the conversation and change nothing, because the thing you are debating was never a position. It was a feeling installed by watching somebody you loved get hurt. Look at what actually gets handed down in a household. Nobody sits a child down and says, "Our family does not invest." What happens is that the child watches which envelope gets opened immediately and which one gets left on the counter. They watch a parent count cash at the kitchen table. They watch what happens in the house the month a job goes. By the time that child is an adult, they do not hold an opinion about markets. They hold a setting, a default level of how much uncertainty feels survivable, and they will experience that setting as their own personality rather than as something they were given, which cuts both ways, and this is the useful part. A household where a parent puts $50 a month into a fund and mentions it at dinner is not transferring $50, it is transferring the default. The child grows up with waiting as a normal thing that works, and that setting is worth vastly more than the balance ever will be. Now the number, because compassion without arithmetic is just a nice feeling. Take $200 a month. Not a fortune. The amount Ray could have moved without noticing, and roughly what his mother was adding to the tin. 30 years of it. In the tin, or in a savings account paying almost nothing, $200 a month for 30 years is $72,000. That is just the deposits added up. Nothing has happened to them. The same $200 a month invested at a long-run average of 8% becomes about $298,000. The difference is $226,000. Now put it in the units this channel likes, because that is where it stops being abstract. $226,000 spread across the 360 months of that period is about $628 a month. Every single month of that fear cost, on average, $628. Sit with the shape of that for a second. He was trying to protect $200 a month. Protecting it cost $628 a month. The fear was more than 3 times as expensive as the thing it was protecting. Let me be straight about the assumptions. 8% is a long-run average below the historical average of US stocks, and no 30-year period delivers it smoothly. I ignored tax and fees, which cut into the invested side, and I assumed the deposits actually kept going through every bad year, which, as we established in Chapter 2, is the exact thing you cannot promise without a buffer. So this number is not a stick to hit anybody with. It is a measurement of what the missing buffer costs, which is a completely different sentence. Here is the piece that is hardest to believe when you have spent your life keeping money where you can see it. Cash is not safe. It is just quiet. Money in a tin or in an account paying close to nothing loses value every single year. Not sometimes. Every year that prices rise. At 3% inflation, a dollar loses about a quarter of its purchasing power in 10 years, and roughly 60% of it over 30. That $11,000 sat on top of the wardrobe for 19 years. Nobody stole it. The number never went down. Every year, it bought less. That is what makes this so cruel as a design. A falling market announces itself. It is on the news. The number on the screen goes red. You feel it in your chest. Inflation makes no sound at all. There is no bad day. There is no statement showing a loss. The tin looks exactly the same as it did last year. So the visible risk gets avoided and the invisible one gets absorbed, and the invisible one is guaranteed, while the visible one has, over every long period in modern market history, eventually recovered. Put a number on the tin and it gets uncomfortable. $11,000, sitting still for 19 years at roughly 3% average inflation, holds about the purchasing power that $6,300 had on the day it went up there. Nobody broke in. The tin was never opened, and a little under half of it is simply gone. Quietly, a slice a year with no bad day to point at. If someone had walked into that house and taken $4,700 off the top of the wardrobe, it would have been a crime, and it would have been the worst thing that happened that year. Because it happened invisibly and slowly instead, it never registered as anything at all. That is a trap in one sentence. We are extremely good at noticing losses that have a moment attached to them, and almost blind to losses that arrive as a rate. That is not an argument for taking risk you cannot survive. It is an argument that there is no option on the table with zero risk. There is only a choice about which risk and which one you can see. And there is one more thing worth saying plainly here, because it is the part that hurts. The people most likely to keep everything in cash are the people who can least afford to lose 40% of it slowly. The mechanism does not fall hardest on the people with the most. It falls hardest on the people who are being careful. Oh, let's be practical and let's be honest about the order, because getting the order wrong is what makes people quit. Almost every investing video tells you to start investing. For a lot of people, that advice is not just premature, it is genuinely harmful because it puts money into a place they will be forced to withdraw it from at the worst possible moment. Here is what has to be true first. 1. High interest debt has to be dealt with. Paying 20% on a card while chasing 8% in a fund is a losing trade with extra steps. 2. There has to be a buffer, not 6 months. That number stops people before they start. Start with $1,000, then 1 month of expenses. That single step converts a market drop from an emergency into an inconvenience, and it is the thing that makes everything after it possible. 3. The money going in has to be money you genuinely will not need for at least 5 years and ideally 10. If you might need it in 18 months, it does not belong in the market. That is not timidity, and that is the correct use of the tool. Notice what those 3 have in common. Every one of them is about buying the ability to wait. That is the whole thing. The market does not reward courage. It rewards survival. And survival is purchased in advance with a buffer by somebody who was boring on purpose. If you are not there yet, you are not failing at investing. You are doing the step that comes before investing, and it counts. Right. Assume the buffer exists and the bad debt is gone. Here is how to start when the fear is still in the room, because it will be. 1. Start at an amount that is too small to frighten you. $25, $50. Whatever amount you could lose entirely without your month changing. The purpose of the first deposit is not growth. It is to prove to your own nervous system that the money did not vanish. You are buying evidence, not returns. 2. Automate it so the decision only happens once. Fear does its work in the gap between deciding and doing. Remove the gap. If the transfer leaves on its own before you see the balance, fear never gets a vote each month. 3. Choose the boring thing, deliberately. A low-cost broad index fund. Not a stock somebody recommended, not crypto, not whatever is being promoted this quarter. The single fastest way to confirm every fear you already have is to start with something volatile enough to drop 40% in your first year. 4. Decide in advance what you will do in a crash and write it down. The sentence is short. I will not sell and I will not add extra. Write it on paper now while you are calm, because you will not be calm later and past. You is the only version of you that can make this decision properly. 5. Do not check it. Once a quarter is plenty. Checking is how a long-term decision gets relitigated as a short-term one, and it is the mechanism by which most people talk themselves out of a plan that was working. And 6, which is really for everyone else watching. If you have family who keep money in a tin, understand what you are actually up against before you start explaining compound interest at them. They are not missing information. They are carrying an experience, and quite often it is a correct one. Help them build the buffer first. The buffer is what makes the fear negotiable. Ray started at $50 a month 4 years ago. He is at $400 now. His balance is not impressive, and it is not the point. He says the thing that changed was not a video and not a spreadsheet. It was the first market drop after he started. He watched the number go down, he did not sell, and 3 months later it came back. He said it was the first time in his life that waiting had ever worked out. His mother still has the tin. She is 71. He has stopped trying to convince her, and honestly, at 71, with no buffer behind her, she may be right. But he opened an account for his daughter with $50 in it, and he shows it to her, not to teach her about returns, to make sure that when she is 34, the default she inherits is a different one, because that is what actually transfers. Not money. Most families have none to transfer. What transfers is the setting, the assumption about whether waiting works. So here's what I want you to take from this, and it is not stop being afraid. The fear is not the problem. The fear is information, and quite often it is accurate. The problem is that the fear has no exit, because nobody ever told you that the thing standing between you and the market is not courage. It is $1,000 in a separate account that you do not touch. That is the door. It is a much smaller door than anyone made it sound. And the only question that matters here is this one. What is the actual thing standing between you and starting? Is it the fear itself, or is it the missing buffer underneath the fear? Be honest and be specific. Tell me in the comments which one it is for you, because they have completely different solutions and almost nobody separates them.